Welcome to Conversations with Cox and Kielseth, and to be more specific, that is filmmaker Alex Cox and myself, film curator Pablo Kielseth. Alex will join us by phone from his home in Oregon, while I sneak away from my office to call him from one of the projection booths used by the International Film Series, which has been screening foreign and independent movies at CU Boulder since 1941. We will keep our chats to about 20 minutes as we discuss whatever movie-related topics grab our fancy. Thanks for joining us.
Okay, action.
Confide your geek around. Oh yeah, the phone's ringing. Who can it be?
Call from Pablo.
It's Pablo. Hey!
Alex, thanks for joining me this week. And we got a lot to talk about in 20 minutes, so I'm going to kind of blaze through it. I just want to say very quickly, though, the movie, you watched a documentary called 17 Blocks, and it's a documentary that apparently was filmed over a 20-year period about a black family, you know, that's kind of in and
Washington, D.C.
Yeah, in Washington, D.C., yeah. Now, I want to quickly let you know that the reason I didn't watch it is because it's not actually going to be available until the middle of next month. But I want you to go ahead and prime the pump and let us know what it's about, because you saw a screener for it. I sent it to you just because I happen to have a screener for it. That's the I should have added some more information, but you went ahead and saw it. So what is it? What were your impressions about 17 Blocks?
That's interesting, because I thought it was opening on the 19th of this month, and so I thought I was being entirely up to date as opposed to ahead of it, but maybe it was 19th of February or something like that. Anyway, it's impressive. I mean, the filmmaker gave this family a video camera, and then at a certain point during the 20-year period, they got a new video camera, so it shifts technically from pretty decent quality 4:3 footage from the earlier days of video to 16:9, very glossy looking footage at times. Yeah, shot by people who weren't trained filmmakers, who were just a family, and it details all their travails, and it's impressive. It's a nice. I wouldn't say it's a nice story, because so much of what happens is terrible, but it's a good, well-told story, and it's the end is terribly powerful when they kind of draw back from the microcosm of this family to how many people have been killed in gun violence in Washington, D.C., and the list of hundreds of names just goes on and on. It's a very strong film.
It's a documentary that's released under the brand of MTV Docs. Is that right?
Isn't that interesting? Yeah, I saw that, an MTV original documentary. I wonder how many other documentaries MTV have made.
I don't know. Did you ever see Hoop Dreams, by the way?
I'm not a sports person.
I
didn't.
That's a documentary that kind of follows, somebody for a while is the only reason I kind of bring it into the mix. That's it.
Yeah, and Michael Apted, the filmmaker who died last week, Limey filmmaker, he was making a series of films about a family, wasn't he?
Yeah, the 7-Up that went on to
7 years. They did another chapter of it.
It got all the way up to 63 and up, and sadly, it looks like we will not see 70 and up. But
unless they shoot it in heaven, unless on the cloud there. Hey, but I wanted to go on a little bit about the Block 17 doc, because it is very moving and very well made, but there's something in it which I've noticed in certain other documentaries that I've seen of late. Yeah. There are two people, including the director of the documentary, who also take a written by credit, and there's somebody else in the credits credited as a story consultant, and I don't understand how that can be in a documentary, in a genuine documentary which records things as they happen. as this one certainly does over a 20-year period, 1,000 hours of footage. Where's the writing come in? I understand the directing and I understand the editing and the producing part of it, but I don't understand the people taking a writing credit. I wonder if anyone, perhaps one of our listeners, can elucidate me as to how that works.
I've actually I've forwarded that question to the distributor, who's a friend of mine, in case he might have some input on that front. But I don't.
And not to single out these guys on especially because it is something that tends to happen in contemporary documentaries. Not always, but sometimes.
But speaking of documentaries, I do want to put in a plug for another documentary that we have available through internationalfilmseries.com, where the distributors are kindly sharing the profits with us at the International Film Series. It's called Some Kind of Heaven, and that's actually one that I saw at Sundance last year. And it's directed by this guy, Lance Oppenheim, who's a filmmaker from South Florida, and his subject are it's America's largest retirement community, The Villages. And I'm really bummed because I was just talking to a bunch of folks in a retirement community here in Boulder last night, and I totally forgot to mention this documentary, which I think would have been very interesting for them, because it's a very different arrangement, obviously. And speaking of things that are unusual within the documentary realm, at least, Some Kind of Heaven, about the Villages, it had 17 producers. It was which went from Darren Aronofsky to our own local Jeff Orlowski. So I'm going to have to talk to Jeff about that. Have you seen, Alex, did you ever see Errol Morris's documentary about the Pet Cemetery?
No.
Gates of Heaven, I think, from 1978. It reminded me a little bit of that.
Maybe I did. Yeah. It's late 70s. Yeah.
It's a very playful, sympathetic documentary, and it follows certain denizens of this community, and they're all very disparate and very colorful and very unusual. So I do think that Some Kind of Heaven is a film. It was one of the more interesting documentaries I saw at last year's Sundance, which I would recommend to folks. I want to say before I forget, and this is a total aside, it's almost like I should wait for after we're taping, but holy smokes. I'm having right now a Lagunitas Born Yesterday Pale Ale, fresh hops, unfiltered ale. Oh, man. It was $4 for a 6-pack it was on sale. It is exceptional. And I know you've had Lagunitas before. You're a fan, right?
Yeah, I've been to the Lagunitas Brewery a couple of times. And in fact, I've been to a film festival which had a relationship with Lagunitas, the Camera Obscura film festival, which Jonathan Marlowe and his colleagues organize. And they had their opening and closing bashes at the brewery. Yes, very nice.
Oh, this is really good.
$4 for a 6-pack?
Yeah, $4. It was like a little over $4 for a 6-pack. It was on sale, and I'm wishing now that I basically just piled up on it. But well, yeah, we do what we can during these times of pandemic. So, trying to stretch the dollars. I wanted to ask you, Alex. I'm just going to trip all over the place here, but were you here in Boulder in like 2015, 2014? When did you leave?
That sounds right. Yeah, I think I was. Why?
Well, were you here when we screened Citizen 4 at the International Film Series? The documentary about Snowden?
I don't know. Maybe I wasn't, because I would have gone to see it if I had, I imagine.
I'm going to guess we must have just missed you for that, because but I know you've seen Citizen 4, right?
No.
That was directed by Laura Poitras, and she actually got an Academy Award for that. It's about the Snowden affair, but the thing that I saw that was interesting is that she was recently in the newspapers saying that she was fired from The Intercept. Did you?
She was fired from The Intercept, and Glenn Greenwald quit, claiming a violation of his contract with The Intercept about a month ago.
Yeah, I knew you were the right person to ask about this, because I was just curious what your take is on this.
Some of the people at The Intercept aren't as good as Greenwald or as Poitras, I would guess. I mean, some of the people at The Intercept actually burned one of their whistleblowers. A woman who came forward to them, reality winner, was like completely burned by journalists of the internet who just took her original materials to the NSA for confirmation, thereby revealing her as their source. And obviously the Intercept is funded by an enormously wealthy eBay oligarch, whose name is Pierre. So there you go. But there are good. I mean, but I'm sure that Poitras will continue to find funding for documentaries, although it's very hard. But I'm sure she'll succeed. And Greenwald is now publishing via journalism via Substack, so you can still follow his journalism if you do an internet search. And if you want to, sign up for it and pay some money, then you get the extra bonus journalism.
How do you feel about Substack?
Well, I mean, it looks fine as a kind of an alternative to WordPress. WordPress have introduced some really weird changes to how you upload stuff, which has made it much more difficult. And so, but Substack is a kind of is intended to be commercialized. So their revenue stream, as far as I can see, doesn't necessarily involve advertising, but involves the writer getting paid subscribers and then Substack take 20% commission.
Right.
So if you just if the stuff that we put online, we just put it online for free. We don't expect people to pay for it.
Right.
But it looks like a fine platform. I mean, especially if primarily what you're doing is text, old-fashioned type writing stuff, it seems like a good platform. What do you think?
No, I think anything that gives a little bit of extra, power to the writer, and especially in these times when we need more diligent, good writers, I'm all for it. I was just
because and also you're right, because people like Greenwald and Matt Taibbi, and they're professional journalists, and they need to receive some revenue from there.
Sure, yeah.
From their original journalists.
Well, speaking of writers, I want to end very quickly to just giving a quick shout out to the ongoing Corman Masterclass that's being put on by our friends over at the Hollywood Theater in Portland, where every Tuesday they're talking to a special guest about a particular title that Corman helped birth, I guess is one way to put it, into the world, whether as a director or a producer or a distributor. And this last Tuesday, they had on John Sayles to talk about The Lady in Red, which is one of the first scripts that he had, produced, made into a movie back in the late 70s.
And it's a good movie. It was directed by Louis Teague.
Yeah, Alex, I got to tell you,
they shot it in downtown LA. It looks a good-looking film.
It was a total surprise to me. I had not seen it before. It's an excellent film. I mean, especially given but I want to hear your thoughts on it, because did you see it back like when it first came out, or what? How did you come across it?
Almost. I think it was kind of on a second release or something when I saw it. And what impressed me was, because I think I saw it before we made Repo Man. And they took advantage of a number of downtown locations, including the concrete bridges over the LA River, and some of their adjunct staircases. And I was just, let's go check out those locations. So it was one of the films, The Lady in Red, like Point Blank, that turned me onto the LA River and to those downtown shooting possibilities. Yeah, it's a good film.
Yeah, and for those who don't know anything about it, this is basically a Roger Corman sort of take on Bonnie and Clyde, coming off, obviously trying to ride a little bit on the coattails of the success of Bonnie and Clyde. But because you have John Sayles involved as a writer, John
and a very good director. Yes. I thought it was really well directed.
Yeah, it really was, and it's got there's going to be a lot of familiar faces in there for people who are coming in cold, including for fans of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Louise Fletcher is just, she's in there, and she's got a pretty interesting role, as well as Robert Conrad. And in fact, my understanding is that, because later, of course, Robert Conrad would also be a star in Alligator, which is also scripted by John Sayles, another Corman film. And that's the movie that actually caught Quentin Tarantino's eye and sort of inspired him to cast Conrad in, later alongside Pam Grier. But also getting back to The Woman in Red, you've got, there's Robert Hogan, and Christopher.
I don't know who any of these guys are.
Well, Christopher Lloyd, you know who Christopher Lloyd is, the bad guy in The Woman in Red, who would go on to become famous mainly for being the mad scientist in Back to the Future, which you have pointed out to me is an interesting sort of a remake of Repo Man.
By Universal, who owned the rights to Repo Man. Yeah, a young money-hungry punk kid teams up with a mad scientist who has a flying car. A little bit. But interestingly, though, I thought that their choice of car was very revelatory, because when we made our version of that story, it was like a beaten-up old 1964 Chevy Malibu. But when Universal made their version, it was like a DeLorean. You get it? Get the joke?
A lot of cocaine in those days. A lot of cocaine in the 80s. Funny.
Universal, they didn't approve of drugs, though. Anyway... But you haven't said yet how John Sayles' talk was, because you listened to what he had to say, right? Well,
I really, I'm a fan of John Sayles. I mean, he's done a lot of great stuff that I've always enjoyed. And he also wrote the script for The Howling and, 8 Men Out. And I'm just skipping around. But I mean, also, I just want to say I am a fan of Piranha, because not only does that have Jaws, but it's clearly influenced by, there's got a lot of stop motion influenced by Ray Harryhausen's early stop motion stuff.
Yes.
But I remember showing Limbo at the International Film Series, which I really liked. And then before that, I really, really liked Lone Star quite a bit.
Yeah.
And he's also just a very, he's kind of a class conscious. I consider him sort of an intellectual who puts in interesting ideas into his scripts. And hearing him talk was great, because he was very lucid. He was they'd fixed the sound issues that they had from the previous week with Peter Bogdanovich. So John Sayles came across as just very on top of it, easy to hear. I will say that it made me want to go and watch Battle Beyond the Stars, which I have not seen, and that came out, I guess, in 1980, and that was also a script by his, and that was basically a Corman, spin-off of Star Wars. But they showed a clip. I think they called it a vibreel for Battle Beyond the Stars, before talking to, interviewing John Sayles. And I was in stitches. I just came out. Battle Beyond the Stars came out in 1980, and it looks actually more entertaining to me, maybe possibly even than Star Wars. So I'm going to have to take a look at that.
It was made by Roger Corman when he bought the Hammond Lumber Yard in Venice, California, not Venice, Italy. Obviously, that's real estate that's been built over by condos now. But he had bought this lumberyard and had turned the big warehouse workshop area of the lumberyard into a studio. And in it, Philip Thomas, who built the sets for the last movie and McCabe and Mrs. Miller, built a spacecraft interior, because the whole thing is a riff on Star Trek and Star Wars, right?
Okay, yeah.
And so Phil built this entire practical spacecraft interior within the lumberyard, and they used that for Battle Beyond the Stars, but then several other films thereafter, including I think one with Klaus Kinski.
So did you see Battle Beyond the Stars?
No, I don't think I did. I remember seeing the set, seeing the location that they'd built for it, but
well,
no.
Man, next time we have you back out here to Boulder, we might have to have a private screening of that. Maybe put it in the backyard or something if I can find a 16 millimeter print. That'd be great.
Sure.
Yeah, no, I'd look forward to that, of course, and I'm just glad that people are finding ways to keep people, the cinephiles, engaged and conversant, and in this case, again, I can't believe that I've never seen The Lady in Red. So my hat's off to the good people over at the Hollywood Theater for bringing it, putting it on my radar. There's obviously always going to be hundreds of movies out there that, there's only so much time in the day. You're never going to see everything, but it's always fun when you come across something that is unexpected and delightful. Definitely go check out what they're doing over there.
Yeah, and it's interesting because the two films have a different... Lady in Red is a film that takes advantage, as I recall, of existing locations and transforms them into what they would have been like in the 1930s or 1920s.
Yeah, they actually went to Chicago, I think, and did as much as they could.
And Chicago too.
Yeah,
and whereas Battle Beyond the Stars, all the money went into building this one set, and then they shot the bejesus out of it and reused it for several other films as well, in the same way as Corman had used those Edgar Allan Poe sets over and over again for like The Raven and The Terror and Pit and the Pendulum.
I would expect no less
from Mask of
Corman.
Red Death. Yeah, and so it's two different approaches to filmmaking, and Corman's was like a classic studio, but reusing the facilities of the studio in a way that the studio normally didn't. And Sayles and Teague were like, new American cinema, 1970s. Let's get out there on the street and shoot it in the real location.
Right.
So it's an interesting a difference in approaches.
Absolutely. All right. Well, listen, we've exceeded our 20-minute time. So
do you get punished when we exceed does the god of podcasting kind of lash you to the...
No, it's more like the size of the bladder starts to lash against the constraints of the organic material, and it's time to take a little break. But that's maybe too much information
to think about.
Yeah.
And on that note, well, thank you very much for a lovely chat, and I look forward to speaking to you again shortly.
All right. Talk to you soon. All right. Ciao.
Okay, man.
And cut. Okay, that's a wrap.
Thanks again for joining Alex Cox and myself today. I'd like to thank Jason Phelps for handling the audio and Ted Thacker for letting us use the intro to his song, The Ballad of Slim Cessna, for the musical cues that bookend these conversations.